Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel Random Drop, and today I need to talk about Dragon Age the Veilguard. Let's get into it. So a little bit about me and Dragon Age. I've been a fan since Dragon Age Origins, and I am generally a RPG lover. I love RPG systems and tweaking with character builds and items to create things that eventually break the game, or you find a way how to outsmart the developers in a combat sequence because of a stupid thing you've built, or just going through some dialogue and using your specific character traits to get through it, like pickpocketing or persuasion checks and things like that. I like the feeling of going through conversations and you not knowing where it's gonna end up. And Dragon Age Origins was the first game for me that I got to see any of that. It opened me up to Western RPGs in general and that format, and it led me to find things like The Witcher, which is my favorite franchise ever, really. And as time went on, Dragon Age started pruning and trying to reinvent itself multiple times to meet EA's demands. And the same thing happened with Mass Effect as well. And games like KOTOR and things like that, KOTOR 2, kind of became things of the past. And we started getting the weird dialogue wheel that actually doesn't fucking work in any actual good way, and I'm still surprised they're still fucking using it. The tearing down of RPG mechanics and also dialogue and choices just started to feel really just soulless or pointless or very fucking obvious. There was never dialogue sequences where you were talking through something and feeling like, oh man, the wrong word could set off a sequence of events that I'm not prepared for. But as time went on, that stuff got smoothed out more and more. And what it comes down to is I get to Veilguard and played it and beat it and finished this game, finished the story that I've been waiting for 10 years after Inquisition, because Inquisition really left me in the spot. Very excited for the Dreadwolf story and where all that was gonna go. By the end of it, man, I just felt nothing. I finished Dragon Age the Veilguard and felt nothing. And if you want a really quick synopsis of my review, it's hey, this game is totally fine. I think story-wise and writing-wise, this game is an absolute failure. But actual gameplay and other things I want to get into the review are the things that kind of kept me going, actually. Funnily enough. But by the 50 or 60 hour mark, I was kind of getting there where oh hey, this combat has worn out its welcome and I'm ready to wrap this shit up. And I did the very end of the game, which people were hyping up, and it's just like any other final act in the game. It's absolutely beautiful and stunning, and this game has incredible art direction in terms of its environments. But man, it is just like playing an RPG and you can see the guy behind the curtain and you know how these choices are going to play out. And overall, that's kind of how I feel about the whole story. I kind of just felt nothing playing through it. I think Dragon Age the Veilguard is a mass disappointment for me personally. So in this review, I want to dig into the positives of what actually kept me playing this game through its end for 60 odd hours. And then I'm going to get into the negatives that really, by the time this game ended, really kind of drew the soul out of me. And I kind of just didn't care what happened. So hey, let's get into the review of Dragon Age the Veilguard.
Hey everybody, before we get started, I just wanted to say, if you enjoy our content and want to stay up to date with our videos, hit the subscribe button. It really helps the channel. Thanks. So, on to the video.
So with the Veilguard's reveal, the biggest thing that people were up in arms about was the art direction. And Dragon Age, every single sequel is changed its art direction significantly. And it's always a cause of contention. But they really went for a specific style when we're kind of really tired of it, because it's kind of all over hero shooters and hero games and games as a service. So whenever the game was initially revealed, that art style was immediately reviled, and especially with that beginning trailer. But one thing I do want to get very clear, this game's actual environmental art style and direction is fucking incredible. Every single area you go to and dungeon and just vista you look at and see, from Antiva to Minthrathis and to the undead area and the forests, looks fucking spectacular. The environmental artists and the directors and whoever the fuck worked on that part of the game, bravo. I wish someone made a very different decision in terms of the character art and the monster designs and so forth, because the actual world you're going through in Dragon Age the Veilguard is absolutely stunning and beautiful, but all your pieces that are in the game just fucking lack any soul and are stiff and super clean and don't match a lot of the tone you're trying to go for. It's just kind of super basic. And the fact that like this is a Dragon Age game where my character is not just drenched in blood as they've been in every single game, and it's like a funny meme and haha, but like what's going on? There was no blood in most of the game. There's like, I could count how much blood there was like on my fucking hand in a game about war and demons and the blight and so forth. It's like a PG-13 game. It's just like really odd. It's just not Dragon Age, weirdly enough. And it feels like a different franchise. And I know I'm still in the positives here and I'm ranting about the art design, but we might as well talk about it. But let's make one thing clear. Environmentally, absolutely nailed it. Absolutely beautiful. I could have used maybe a little bit more grime here and there. Castle's a little bit more dirtier and bloodier, but man, what a spectacular looking game. And I eventually grew all right with them, but the character designs and all that like kind of just adds to more of what I'm going to get into the negatives of this, just like this game's avoidance of the dirty, weirdly enough, and everything has to be so fucking clean, and it's kind of off-putting in a lot of ways. Other than actually exploring this game and seeing these spectacular environments, what kept me playing was the combat, which is not, it's a fucking action game. It is like a slightly more complex God of War with a few more abilities and cooldowns, which are your teammates to push you through fights. And I imagine I had a very different experience because I played the game on Nightmare, because the basic difficulty was a fucking snooze fest. So on Nightmare, I actually had to think about my defensives and things like that, and think about how to output damage to get through these fights a little bit faster and so forth. And I was able to do boss fights that were way higher level, but also there's sometimes I met matches where I couldn't beat it at the time and had to come back with a different plan. I actually had to engage with its systems, but I imagine in normal mode you would just button mash through most of this game. So if you ever do play Dragon Age the Veilguard, I would recommend, if you do like tinkering with characters and caring about actual gameplay, I would play on Nightmare. The combat feels smooth and really fun and meaty and crunchy in a lot of ways. It gets very repetitive towards the end whenever you realize like, oh, you only have a certain amount of combos, and the fact that you can't switch classes or anything like that, and changing builds is a hassle as you have to put every single point back in. It could get pretty repetitive towards the end, but the actual loop with the combat is what kept me coming back, where you go and explore these environments and eventually fight harder enemies and side content, side bosses that gave you more unique rewards for you to mess with your build some more. And I got some enjoyment out of the loop as eventually I found my squad of Davern and Emmerich, fire and necromancy, and focused on debuffs and stacking bleeds, and I created basically like this really large bleed build that let me kill boss fights that were like 20-30 levels higher than me, because I was just running around stacking bleed all the time. And it felt good to do that. It felt good engaging with those systems and using my reflexes to dodge and parry alongside it. So in itself, like, Dragon Age Veilguard's combat's actually pretty good and fun. It's just, again, it's just kind of not Dragon Age. I really wish I could swap party members, as I would really like to see how it feels to play a mage or play a warrior and so forth, and not just be stuck on this rogue role. So if they ever do make a sequel, I really hope that they get over themselves and let people swap characters. Part of an RPG is building your party. You are not just this one fucking character, you are this party, and synchronizing and going through this journey with your party is most of the goddamn fun. Overall, I had a good time exploring this game's world and its environments and engaging with that combat as deep as it could go, until I eventually hit that wall where like, oh hey, there's nothing harder to fight in this game. All these boss fights are starting to repeat in a lot of ways, and they're reusing enemy types and things like that. It kind of lost a lot of juice towards the end, I would say. But the game's loop kept me going because the story and the characters were not. But actually playing through Dragon Age the Veilguard, I found fun. I'm really trying to struggle to think of more positive things about this game. But the thing with an RPG is that it's a lot about the writing and the interactions between characters. And systems wise and gameplay wise, I think Dragon Age the Veilguard is a pretty good game. But that's where we get into the negatives here, where it's just the constant failure on the writing front, with the character design, and the story. And the fact that you can't switch classes or anything like that, and changing builds is a hassle as you have to put every single point back in. It could get pretty repetitive towards the end, but the thing with an RPG is that it's a lot about the writing and the interactions between characters. And systems wise and gameplay wise, I think Dragon Age the Veilguard is a pretty good game. But that's where we get into the negatives here, where it's just the constant failure on the immersion front, the party members, and so forth. And I have some points here I want to dig into of like why I think it fails so hard and where it fails. So let's get into the negatives. So the first great negative I want to get into is the lack of role playing. When the Veilguard was announced, they were trying to announce like, oh yeah, you can pick all these different backgrounds and they're gonna be all different. You can be a shadow dragon or an Antivan crow, and all of that is bullshit and meaningless, as it doesn't really affect the game in any way other than some like dialogue choices and some slight scene changes. Your background is nothing compared to your background in Origins, where if you're an elf, you go through an alienage and so forth, right? And it's such a crazy different experience. Now all these like role-playing choices you make in the Veilguard are just bullshit, and that goes to the choices in themselves. Every dialogue choice is just you agreeing with someone in 3 different ways, and really you never get that feeling of where you're having a conversation, and this conversation can turn in different ways depending on your choices, because the game makes it blatantly obvious whenever there is actually going to be a grand choice. It gives you like these little arrows and it says blatantly up top, if you pick this is gonna happen. That's so like weird, like telltale adventure gaming, and just again showing you the person behind the curtain on how it all works. And whenever those choices pop up, you know that everything else you chose before didn't fucking matter, and there's no options to resolve things in different ways. Because I'm an Antivan crow or because I'm a shadow dragon, they all resolve in the same way. You are not playing a role, and this franchise has gotten away from that more and more and more. But I really thought that Veilguard was the one where they were like, hey, they were gonna go and look back and respect the original and kind of pull some things back, as video gamers are a lot smarter nowadays. They're more accepting to bearing consequences in dialogue and so forth. It doesn't scare them away as much as it did back in the day. Dark Souls and the games of alike of being vague and weird has opened up gamers to be just trying out more shit and not being so scared of stuff. But yeah, man, the actual dialogue and role-playing is cookie cutter as fuck, and it's absolutely meaningless. You are just a snarky asshole in 3 different ways, and I think Rook is probably like the worst part of the actual fucking game, quite honestly. I really wish that like the companies would just go back to silent protagonist, as it works pretty fucking well, as you could just meld the conversation around them and we fill the dialogue in our heads. And please stop with this fucking dialogue wheel, man. There's so many times, especially in this game, it's way worse, where you choose a dialogue option, it says one thing, and the thing that character says is not even in the same fucking realm. It's like when they were connecting the dialogue choices in their back systems, they didn't even look at the pictures or the faces or even what it's referencing, and they just connected 3. We just need 3 choices for every single thing, and it's just absolute bullshit. And with the lack of role-playing, that limits you on level design, as you don't have like a persuasion stat or anything like that. And all the mission and level design is just run through hallways and kill dudes. This is just a fucking action game. There's no that cool mission like in Orlais where you're sneaking around gathering information and talking to different NPCs as you try to clue and figure out what is actually going on, which leads to 3 different ways that scene can play out. You can avoid a whole boss fight if you connect enough of the dots, but there's nothing like this in the Veilguard. So it's basically just a bunch of hallways of killing dudes, then you eventually get to the big bad, and the big bad maybe gets away this time, and then you go on a couple companion quests and they talk about their feelings, and then you find the big bad again and beat them. It's just like that for 8 different fucking characters, and it's so boring. And by the end of those companion quests, it always breaks down to a choice of like, should I be Raveni or Markunari? Should I do this or should I do that? And it's just, again, so binary and stupid. It would be so much better if the dialogue choices I was selecting as I talked to this person throughout the adventure melded them to eventually they arrived to this certain point. But no, just having this weird thing at the very end where like, man, I'm not sure, should I do this or this? When it's like none of my fucking business. Is so stupid. And they ask like if it's advice, but they always go with your advice, man. And that just leads to more disconnection with the game's plot and its characters. The lack of actual role playing kills this game. It's is just soulless. It makes me feel nothing by the end. This game has nothing to say in any way, shape, or form, and it is just like cookie cutter as fuck. And I'm trying to be I'm trying to be positive, but it's like coming out now of like me just thinking about how much I feel like I wasted my time playing this. After those credits rolled, I just felt absolutely nothing. And that's so disappointing for a franchise I really liked. And it's just gone. It's just like whatever. And I feel nothing, and it's fine. I'm just gonna move on because there's other things out there nowadays, but it's just sad to see. The next point I want to make, what really hurts the whole adventure in general, is its segmented storylines. There is the main plot, and there is like big mission, big mission, big mission, big mission, but in between all that, it is just you going with all your different party members and trying to resolve their specific issues, which is fine. I'm a JRPG enjoyer. I love going through my party members' bullshit and figuring out their problems and going back through their history and so forth. I love when that shit happens, when you get to the town and it's this character's town and they're acting all weird about it because they have some weird past about it and so forth. But the way Veilguard does it's so weird, as it only focuses on those characters and it feels like the rest of the game doesn't exist. It feels like BioWare needed to finish this game and they're like, okay, well, we need a storyline for all these characters, so all right, let's bang out 8 storylines, and the 8 people who made those storylines didn't talk to each other, and there was no cohesive vision on how this was actually gonna go flow through the plot. When you play any JRPG or RPG in general, there's a flow. You go through an adventure and eventually hit that town that means something to this character and so forth. And you're meeting the characters as you go, and it puts a continuous plot and pacing as you travel the world. But in Veilguard, you have the beginning opening plot, then you gather all the party members, and when you gather each member, it basically gives you a snippet of what their storyline is gonna be. Well, mine's gonna be about my griffins, mine's gonna be about like dragons, mine's gonna be about the undead stuff. It gives you a little snippet and like, oh, they're gonna have their own evil villain in each one and so forth. You gather them all up, do a big main story mission, and then go resolve all your people's problems. But again, it feels so separate and segmented, and it just really adds nothing to the overall plot of the game. So by like the 20-hour mark or so, you've collected basically all the zones in the game, and the rest of the game is you just teleporting back and forward, doing these small little missions, a lot of them which is like you talk to a guy for a little bit and walk around, when like a lot of that talking and lore and building would be just a conversation you would have in base, and you would go through lists and just talk to a guy for 30 minutes. And that was great, that was awesome, that worked, and it paced well with the actual game and what was happening in the game. Like in Origins, when you would just stop and just talk to your party members about shit for a little bit as you've been going through your adventure. Not this weird thing where like, okay, let's go do a social link where we stand around and talk for a bit, and then I'm going to give you lore about Grey Wardens as we walk around. And it's just like, it just doesn't work, and it like kills the pacing, and all this leads to a disconnection with the main cast, as this game is very much trying to sell you like they're a team or some bullshit, which you like barely ever see them interact unless they're standing around in the actual main base. They rarely ever have to say anything about each other's missions. They never actually feel like they're friends or anything like that, because it was never built up to that point, as there was never like this overall storyline that they're all going on together and building that bond. It is just, again, all these separate little stories, and you're expected to give a fuck about each other. And with other RPGs and JRPGs, usually, again, they're going through an overall central plot and going on that journey together. And it's not like new or anything. Shit, KOTOR did this shit too. So it's so weird that they're just like not able to replicate that. So whenever the game is trying to force like all these characters are getting in a relationship and shit like that, like I don't fucking care, as like you barely even see them interact or even show that they care about each other unless you're in that fucking tower. The way this game just focuses way too much on the companions is this game's biggest kryptonite, honestly, because the actual main act portions of the game that is just not about the companions are the better parts of the game. But that's like the stuff that's connecting to the world and lore that was in Inquisition and Dragon Age Origins and all that stuff. So basically what I'm saying, all the new stuff that they've added is the worst part of the game. It's sad to see. And finally, with the segmented storyline and the segmented storytelling, it leads to a disconnection with the actual like world state and what's going on and what is even fucking happening, as there's supposed to be these gods out on loose doing shit, but it never really feels like that. And it's always like the same chuckle fucks causing problems everywhere you go. It's always Venatori or the Antom or some bullshit, and nothing ever feels like it has any stakes or any value, unless again you are on those like main act missions, which is like 4 missions total in the game. I really don't know why they went for this segmented format. The only thing I can think of is that they just ran out of time on this game after they had to rewrite the story, as it was no longer going to be the Dreadwolf, it was going to be the Veilguard, and they had to just like use the pieces they had to make this just like really crappy thing. And there are some companion quests that have like way better quality missions and quests than others, so you can definitely feel that difference on certain characters. It's just like, wait, why is Emmerich's mission and boss way cooler than everyone else's? I just bought some generic fuckwad in Nev's quest. Again, there's just like no real consistency with any of it. It feels like, again, they had a rush to finish this game. Which leads me to my final complaint. Dragon Age the Veilguard's biggest crime is forgetting Dragon Age's strengths. Which, by what I mean, is that the most unique things about Dragon Age's story and world were like the really cool things. Like, there's like one mention of the Chantry in the game. There's no really real talks of mages and Templars. You never really get into the depths of Minrathous and the Magisters and the slavery that's supposed to be going on, or any of that. It's always on the fringes. It never gets into the dirty or the brutal. Everything's so fucking clean and weird. The way the art style meshes with that just kind of takes away from it more. There's nothing that makes you question what you're doing or what you should do next, like the mission where Anders blows up the Chantry and you have to choose a side. There's no moments like that at all in the game. They're all very fucking cookie cutter and lame. There's no like elf racism or anything like that, or how are the elves treated in the north, as the only real elves you interact with are the veil jumpers, who are just off on their own doing their own thing and like are never really harassed by anyone and things like that. It's like, are there alienages in the north? And the way where how like the Qun and the war between Tevinter and the Qun was kind of just like abandoned, and the Antom go against everything they were taught and learned and embrace magic with these new gods. And the same thing with Tevinter and like the weird pride with old Tevinter and the old gods. They just put everything down and immediately bow down to these elven gods. I feel like I learned more about the North and Tevinter from Dorian in Inquisition, when me and him were just talking in a room for a while. I feel like I don't know what the fuck is happening in the North, or any of their politics, or anything that is going on. There's assassins that like run one town, I guess, and then Minrathous is apparently only Docktown, and it talks about slavery all the fucking time, but I never see a single slave or anything, or what is the plight of the people there. It's like never focuses on that once. It's just like, oh, Venatori bad. Okay, well, what percentage of the population is Venatori? How much of it is an issue? Is it like a known issue? Are there mages that are against it? The fact that Dorian has like 2 scenes is fucking stupid. I could go on and on, but Dragon Age the Veilguard fundamentally forgets where it came from and doesn't really answer or pull anything interesting from the franchise's past. I don't even think we interacted with like the Chantry once. There's like a building in Antiva, I think, or something like that, and that's it. It just goes on. Are there alienages and so forth? Like, the things that made the Dragon Age world so interesting and unique are just missing from the Veilguard wholesale, and it's like replaced just like with generic, just nothing. But you can really tell whenever you look at the demon designs and the dark spawn designs, where they're changed out for like weird generic goo monsters with googly eyes and shit, and the demons are elementals now instead of like these freakish monsters that are like, this one is pride and so forth, and it's like this big lumbering monster. It just, all the grossness and like anything dirty got removed, and I imagine they just didn't like want to touch subjects like slavery or the prosecution of mages is carried across the whole franchise and is just gone in this game. And I understand we're in the North, we're not in Ferelden and things are different, but to have like nothing and basically feel like we're in a different universe slash world is really weird. And that, yeah, that's my final complaint, is that the Veilguard forgets the Dragon Age franchise's strengths, and it feels like nothing of that was carried over in terms of like the unique aspects the world had. And it's really disappointing, as those conversations I would have with party members as we discussed their lore and where they came from were some of the most interesting parts. The way people would discuss about mages and abominations and the choices these people have to make, again, were the most interesting parts. And like none of that is here, and it's just kind of like this, it's just kind of this soulless mush that we're given. Everything's happy and great. These characters are smiling and at the weirdest points when things should be going so fucking bad, and they're just out there having a good time, guys. And it is just tonally not what this franchise is or was, and I'm not interested in where this franchise goes in the future. I just don't care. And that's the worst thing that you could have done with this game, is just by the end of it, I just don't care. Dragon Age the Veilguard looks incredible environmentally and is pretty fun to play gameplay loop wise, but personally it's an absolute failure in terms of world, storytelling, and pacing. Thank you for watching my review. Let me know how you feel down below. If you disagree, agree, like, comment, subscribe, and I will see you on the next Random Draw review. Peace.